In this recording, I'll go over the requirements for work breakdown structure, or WBS for short. The learning outcomes for this segment would include understanding the guidelines for creating a WBS, learn about WBS misconceptions, understand the benefits for using WBS, identify deliverables, sub-deliverables, work packages, and applying WBS coding or numbering to the WBS. To start off, the work breakdown structure guidelines include the following. Sub-deliverables would contain work packages. Work packages are the lowest level in the WBS, and they would typically be actionable tasks that can be assigned to a department, assigned to an individual. You can also estimate cost and duration for each of those work packages. A few misconceptions about WBS. Typically, a work breakdown structure cannot be an exhaustive list of all the work required on your project. Instead, have a list of the overall project scope and broken down into manageable chunks that would be meaningful for your organization. WBS is not a project plan or a schedule, and it doesn't list actions in chronological order. All it does is it specifies what activities need to be done on the project. It doesn't tell you how it's going to be done or when it's going to be done. I'm going to start off by drawing a WBS. The example that I have here is building a house. When you start off thinking about how you're going to draw your WBS, or how you're going to break down the components of building a house project, you typically start off by listing the project at the top of your WBS. So in this case, if we're building a house, let's call it project house. This would be your first level of the WBS. So this is level 1 in your WBS. So level 1 is your project. Next would be your level 2. So level 2 would be your main deliverables in this particular project. The one thing I want to note is one correct way of creating a WBS for this particular project. If you task two teams to create a WBS for their project, more often than not, they will come up with two different WBSs that are not identical. And the reason for that is it depends on the scope of work that is entailed on your project. So each project can have a different scope of work. Projects are typically unique, have different sets of deliverables. Depending on the scope of your work, you can end up with a different WBS. Also, the other factor is how you approach the work within your organization can be different. You can have a different methodology. So, two companies that specialize in building houses would have different methodologies for approaching their project, and therefore they will come up with a different WBS. So I'll start off with one version of a WBS and then a second version, and show you how you can end up with two different WBSs that at the end of the day produce the same result. So in this example, let's start off by breaking down the main deliverables of our project. Let's say in our project we are tasked with designing the concept for the house. The next deliverable that we would have is constructing the house, and then the third deliverable would be commissioning the house. So these are three main deliverables that we can list right off the bat here. So I mentioned design being the first deliverable. The next deliverable would be construction. And the third deliverable would be commissioning. And this would be level 2 in our WBS. Just going to put a box around each of these deliverables as we build out our WBS. So WBS is a hierarchical breakdown of the work required on your project. So in this, so far in this project, we have three main deliverables that we're working towards achieving. The next level in a WBS would be your sub-deliverables. So sometimes the project is large enough that you can have sub-deliverables for each of these main deliverables. Carry forward with that example. So let's say in this project, we're tasked with coming up with the engineering design and the interior design. So each of those could be sub-deliverables. So engineering, and the other sub-deliverable could be interior. In the construction deliverable, let's say there are also a couple of sub-deliverables that we can break this down into. So let's say there is a above-grade construction and subgrade construction. So subgrade would be your everything below ground, and above grade is everything above the ground. So let's say sub-deliverable would be your subgrade construction and above grade. Now, over to commissioning, we can assume that there's electrical and then there's plumbing. We have to build the plumbing and get it working, and same with the electrical. So we can break down commissioning into two sub-deliverables. So far we've listed our sub-deliverables for each of the main deliverables. So this would be considered level 3 in your WBS. This is level 3 in your WBS. Now, moving forward, we would have to break down each of these sub-deliverables into what's called work packages. Work packages are actionable tasks that can be assigned to an individual or a department in your organization. Typically, it would describe an action that you perform, and as you create work packages, you want to use verbs in those work packages to identify that they are actionable items. Let's focus on the construction deliverable here. We'll work it down to work packages and give you an idea of what work packages would look like. Let's look at subgrade sub-deliverable. How can we break it down even further? So subgrade, we can break it down into excavate, excavate foundation. The next work package that we create for subgrade is build foundation forms, or let's say construct foundation forms. And then third work package could be pour the concrete in your foundation forms. So in this particular example, our work packages have ended up on level 4 in our WBS. So again, it depends on the scope of the project and how large the amount of deliverables are. Your sub-deliverables can be broken down into sub-deliverables and so on. You could essentially, go down to a level 5, or in some instances, Your project could be small enough in scope such that you would, from level 2, your main deliverables can be broken down directly into work packages. So again, it depends on the scope of the project, the amount of work that's required. You would end up with a larger or a smaller WBS than this particular example. Moving forward, I mean, you can take each of these sub-deliverables and break them down even further. So for above grade construction, you would have constructing wood frame, installing drywall, painting, and so on and so forth. Just to keep this example simple, I'll stop right here. The next thing I want to move on to is how would you number this particular WBS. So when you create a WBS, it's important that you give it a code or a number, and that makes it easy for you to identify work packages and deliverables. So the numbering convention for a WBS, you start off at the top. House is the name of your project. The project would get a numbering of 1.0, and this would indicate that it's the level 1 in your WBS. As you move down into your WBS on level 2 here, level 2 you would carry on with following numbering. So for design, it would be classified as 1.1. Construction would be 1.2. Commissioning would be 1.3. So this numbering sequence identifies your deliverables as a level 2 in your WBS. And then going down further, engineering would be 1.1.1. Interior design would be 1.1.2. For the construction deliverable 1.2, we look down into the sub-deliverables. Subgrade would be 1.2.1. Above grade would be 1.2.2. Electrical will be 1.3.1. Plumbing would be 1.3.2. Now moving down to our work packages. So the excavate foundation work package would be, again, following the same numbering that we've got to here. This work package would be numbered 1.2.1.1. Construct foundation forms would be 1.2.1.2. Pour concrete would be 1.2.1.3. So the idea here is every time you move one level down into your WBS, you add another level in your numbering. So in the example of house, we start off at 1.0, and then you move down in your WBS, you add a decimal, and you add the sequence of your your main deliverables. So design would be 1.1, construction is 1.2, commissioning is 1.3. And now as you move down even further in your WBS, you add another decimal point and you start your numbering at 1. So design, you add another decimal point. Engineering would become 1.1.1, and so on and so forth until you get down to your work packages. The reason why you would want to number your WBS, it makes it easy for you to reference it with your team, with your client. It's much easier to point someone to work package 1.2.1.3. Eliminates any confusion or misinterpretation. You can reference your WBS. Any team member can go back to the WBS and very easily understand or know what you're talking about when you reference 1.2.1.3. So that's the benefit for using a coding or a numbering system. Now overall, the benefit of using a work breakdown structure is it allows you to methodically work down your project to smaller or manageable components. So for example, if you had 3 supervisors on site, Sally is responsible for deliverable 1.1, Mike is responsible for deliverable 1.2, and John is responsible for 1.3. You can assign deliverables to, for example, managers, and each manager can go to their respective department and assign work packages to their team. So, for example, Mike is the construction manager. He has a project team that works with him. He can easily assign work packages to members of his team. So he can either assign sub-deliverables such as subgrade and above grade construction to two supervisors, for example, or depending on the structure of the organization, he can be assigning work packages directly to his team. Todd's going to be responsible for this work package. Bill is going to be responsible for this work package, and Rich is going to be responsible for this work package. So your WBS can be a useful tool for assigning tasks to your team members. Another benefit for using a WBS is we know that excavating foundation typically takes 3 days, and it usually costs us about $10,000 to perform this task or this work package. Construct foundation forms based on our historical information and knowledge. This work package on average would take us 7 days at a cost of $12,000. Pour concrete can be done in 1 day at a cost of $25,000. So by assigning duration and cost to each work package, you can roll it up to the next level up in your WBS and assign a cost and a duration for that particular sub-deliverable, and roll it up again all the way until you get to your overall project cost and duration. And this gives you a good estimate in terms of your overall project cost and duration. So let's work this up. So for example, let's add up the totals for subgrade. So subgrade, the duration for subgrade is 3 days plus 7 days plus 1 day. So that gives us a total of 11 days for subgrade. At what cost will we be able to complete the subgrade sub-deliverable? It's going to cost us $25,000 plus another 12. That's $37,000 plus another 10. We're at $47,000 for the subgrade deliverable. Then you could do the same for your other sub-deliverables. Roll them all the way up, and that will give you a total number of days for your project and the total number of dollars for your project. And that gives you a good estimate of your overall resources that are required for your project. So next what I'll do is I will draw a WBS again for the same project, building a house, but this time our WBS is going to look different, and the reason for that is this particular company or this particular team approaches the project in a different manner than the previous example. So let's start off by naming our project. This is the house project. It's project number 1.0. And let's break down this project. And again, in this example, we approach it a little bit differently than the previous example. In this example, the way we build a house, we don't have design as part of our scope. So we focus on foundation, and then we focus on the internal work in the house, and then external work required for the house. So let's number it 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. So this is your level 1. Level 2 is your deliverable. And then in this particular example, let's create some sub-deliverables, and then you can go down further into each of these sub-deliverables and create your work packages. But the idea I want to demonstrate here is this WBS looks different from the first WBS that we created, and both are fine. Both are correct. Depends on again how your team approaches your project, the scope of work that you have on your project, and what makes sense to you and your team. When you create any work package here, your team should be able to understand what's required in this work package.